For this Perceptive podcast, this is part two of my recent chat with veteran game developer Tony Barnes. If you missed the first part, there'll be a link to that in the description down below, but we're going to be continuing right where we left off. So sit back, relax, and it's time for some more game design discussions. And I mean, like, one of like the best studios, I think, in terms of like building like a brand awareness, like that would be like Clay Entertainment. Like they've done like Don't
Mm,
Starve, Invisible Ink, what was that? Hot Lava. Like they have just like a very wide spectrum of games. And again, like to your point, like is like a Clay fan going to buy and love every single one of them? Maybe, but more oftentimes than not, it's like, well, if I enjoy Clay for let's say Auction Not Included, then maybe I'll check out their latest one. Maybe I won't. But the second they announce something new or exciting, all those fans will at least go, what was that? Let me go check that out. It's like again, it's like that same
yep.
kind of appeal we see from the likes of Nintendo or Blizzard in their prime or Valve,
hmm
where the stew can just say, we're working on something, and everyone just immediately turns their head. And like for a
Yeah.
lot of indie developers, like they would kill for having that kind of coverage. But it's something that takes again like years of brand building and proving to people that you're good at what you do. Like again, like I see from a lot of like first time developers where they'll put out like an amazing game, but there's no coverage of it. Just like I've seen from games from so and so who worked on so and so kind of game, and it's not really all that exciting, but they have that name, that prestige around them, so it just kind of like
hmm
automatically generates some buzz just because of that.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on their name, but the Oni guys, uh, they did Oni 1 and 2,
Yeah,
um, and now they have no rest for the wicked.
yeah,
Um, so, um, I love their trajectory. Um, they did a 2.5, the Metroidvania, right? The next one is the same, but it's not. Like on a technical level, you can see them doing a lot of stuff to prepare for the next thing, right? There's a lot in Ori, sorry, not Oni.
mhm,
There's a lot in Ori 2 that that it when you look at No Rest for the Wicked, you're like, and you look back at Ori 2, you're like, oh, okay, I see where the tech and the technique came from to all of a sudden be doing this thing. But like the the press when they're talking about it, they're like, and here's their new game, and it's a top-down ARPG. We are confused, right? I looked, and being a schizo like I am, I'm not confused. Um,
mhm.
like I said, I'm looking at their trajectory, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I get it. Um, but even though there are people who are like confused, instead of that being a negative, because they have such goodwill built up by the first two Ori games, um, it's a positive. It's remember those games, Ori? They were really polished, really tight. They were really fun. So okay, we're gonna pay attention and give these guys some, give them some coverage. But hey, they're doing a genre that isn't like what they did before, so that gives another hook for the press to talk about. But because there's a bias towards because of the previous games, instead of talking about it in a negative light, which the press could easily do and turn the narrative of this all around, talk about it in a positive light. Um, and so, as long as those guys who I feel really horrible, but not remembering their name right now, but as long as they don't trip on no rest for the wicket, then from there their trajectory will hockey stick up again even further because they'll have proven, they'll have 3 games that will be great, good to great, depending upon how anybody feels about things during the day. Um, and they'll prove that they can migrate from genre to genre. When in reality, what they're proving is that they can change the camera angle, and that everyone will go, "Ooh." Uh,
I did look it up. It's Moon Studios who did Ori.
Moon Studios, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I said, I like what they're doing. Um, um, I'm gonna try and do the same myself. Is like about these side games. Funny. They I was talking with a friend of mine and saying I don't really want to be a guy, but I do quite like the view and working in it right now. I'm not sure how to deal with that, but I don't want to be known as top down guy.
Mm-hmm.
And this friend has worked on um, quite a few similar games and was like, yeah, well, I've made an entire career out of being in the same camera view, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Um, but I think about these things.
And with like kind of like that trajectory, like the other like advantage of this, like that we see is that oftentimes when developers make like pivots like this, like they used to make a Metroidvania, and then they're making a ARPG or whatever, is it oftentimes you get really like interesting and original takes on that genre that you wouldn't necessarily see coming from a studio that, let's say, just all they make are ARPGs or all they make are platformers. One of my favorite ARPGs was the game Victor Vran, which came from the developer who did, I think, the Tropico games. And like just like out of
I
the
didn't
blue,
know
they
that.
thought, well, let's make
Mm-hmm.
it ARPG, and it plays nothing like any other ARPG that I played. And I still remember it fondly over all the ones I played, which are just again just mirroring Diablo, Last Epoch, or Path of Exile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and see, that's kind of ties back to what I'm saying is like um, utilizing knowledge that's kind of there that nobody's really picking up. It's like
Mm-hmm.
so. Um, so it's not just like going back and looking at old games or whatever. It's also having knowledge that someone else doesn't have, or isn't, or then you're not so steeped in that certain genre that that's how you can kind of bring something new. Like
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being some sort of line item in your document and being a milestone in a publisher deal, insert innovation here. It's like the the innovation is more organic based upon um, really the personalities, the people that are building things. Um, there are a lot of games that are what they are because the people making it weren't fifth iteration of that certain game. They weren't genre experts in that thing, but they were given the leeway and they had the passion to actually get something going that um, becomes innovative and it becomes all of a sudden what everyone wants to fast follow.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was sorry. I totally lost the thought.
That's all right. One thing I wanted to go back to, like regarding action design, and get your thoughts on when you were talking about earlier about like that challenge of picking a lane or picking a side that you want your game to feel, what your market to be. It reminded me of this indie game that I played. I think it was like 2 3 years ago. It was called Soldiers, SOUL, as
Oh,
like
uh
the
huh.
thing. And the idea
Mhm.
was like when the game was released, it was very frustrating to play. Like enemies could not be hit stun. They would just, you would smack them, you could barely dodge out of the way. It was very frustrating to play, very annoying. And there were people who loved that. Like there was like that hardcore segment where just like That's the kind of game we want. We want it to be very dodge centric. We want to be, you take one hit, it's like 80% of your health bar, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a lot of people saying, no, like, this is frustrating to play. It doesn't feel right. I can't even get past the first level. I still remember, like, the achievement where it was, like, only, like, 40% clear, like, the first dungeon of the game, like, the very first level. And the developers
Wow.
went back and said, okay, we'll rebalance it. We'll completely change the difficulty. So they massively cut the enemy's health. I think they gave like some kind of hit stun. They kind of like just completely try to like rebuild the entire combat engine. And they released that as a patch. And then what ended up happening was all their hardcore fans said, you betrayed us. Now the game's too easy. It's, I'm not having any fun with it. And it kind of like it was like one of those issues where I felt like they didn't touch on why people were having trouble with it. And even then,
Mm.
it's a case of it's kind of like that push and pull I see from a lot of like hardcore games. Like when they get like a little bit more mainstream following or more eyes are on them, it's that situation of do I still cater to like the super hardcore, 10% or less who are going to play this game with all the masochism involved? Or do I try and make some concessions so that someone who's not super pro can play it? But then if I end up pissing off all the people who play the game in the first place, then you get that lesson, well, I was just supposed to make it frustrating and horrible to play from the get go.
Yeah, it's a careful balance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part of that is recognizing. Well, so you need to recognize whether it is a um, problem in your design or if it's a problem in your execution,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, okay, when when I get people playing Polygunner wrong, um, it pains me. It's frustrating. Um, your instinct is to go, "Oh, these people are idiots," and just like you know, screw them or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to do, and what I do is like sit and go, okay, what is it that I want? What is my intent with the core of this game? Um, if I change it in the way that people are suggesting or whatever it is that it is to are these changes going to erode that core, right? Um, if they are, then was my core solid? Am I built on sand, or is it is my foundation bedrock? So you have to ask yourself these questions as a game designer, game maker, um, instead of just going stupid public or just going public all right. Okay, make game a la carte for everybody on the planet. Um, you have to really look at what is it that you were trying to achieve with the game, right? And then from there, start going, okay, that this thing that I did is a problem. I didn't do my job here correctly, right? And I would say that like I'd be at these cons, even at GDC, and I'd say the issue that was going on, and and I'd say it to a friend, and especially at some place like GDC where you're surrounded by peers, and they kind of go, "Oh yeah," and like dismiss the player. And I say, "No, no, no, it's my fault, my fault." And this was like from veterans to indies I'm talking to, especially when it comes to indies. I try to be a little more Obi-Wan or Morpheus when I'm talking with them, so they like can um can understand so we can fast forward the learning of game design. Uh, that's like, no, it's my fault. It's my fault because there are people that get it, right? And when they
Mm-hmm.
get it, they love it, right? So what that means is it's my fault for not teaching them properly, and that's okay. It's okay to realize that you're not doing your job right, so that you can learn how to do it better and do it properly. In the case of Soldiers, which I remember this game now, and God, I love the art in it.
Oh yes.
Um, them kind of bending the knee and deciding to lean in on the masses, and lose their their hardcore, which you know I don't think they weighed those choices well. At the time that they did it,
Hmm.
um, you'd already lost the masses, right?
Yep.
Uh, so you kind of at that point need to decide, should I probably should just okay, let me let me make sure the hardcore are happy, and let's figure out how to regroup on something else or something adjacent to get the masses back. But and this is like the drama that like Bungie goes through on a weekly
Hmm.
basis with Destiny. People don't really realize this, but it's like they have to cater to such a wide berth of players, and then they still, they do crap onboarding for newbies,
Hmm.
but they still are trying to figure out how to do that. It's a hard problem. But like with soldiers, I think they step back. I think they reacted to an attack essentially,
Hmm.
um, and they didn't step back and go, okay, what is it that's really important to this game? What is the most important thing? What is the core of this game? Um, how do we make it so that more people enjoy the core, right? Because if the hardcore enjoy the core, if the hardcore enjoy the game, they more than likely enjoy the core, right?
Hmm.
Um, so you can make adjustments, try and pull in, and you don't, when you're pulling in more, people like people, especially companies, bigger companies. Not that these guys are bigger companies, but like they go, oh well, when I need to pull in, I need to pull in this much, and it's like, no, 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 it's okay, just pull in this much, and then this much, and then this much, you know, um, because you need. It's the same way that you need to protect the core of your game. You need to protect the core of your audience, the customer. You need the
Hmm.
ones that you have. You need to protect them, unless they're so small that you're like, screw them. Let me alienate them and just 180 this whole thing, right? If you're willing to do that and you run the numbers and that makes sense, then fine, so be it. But the more likely scenario is that you really want to maintain as much of them as possible. So you expand slowly, not not big, giant, rapid, sweeping change. Then you're going to alienate the people that loved you, and you're more than likely not going to get back people that did not like you before because they've already moved on, and they're not like, oh, let me give it a chance all of a sudden. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, there's an anomaly, there's like No Man's Sky and all that, but don't use outliers to handle your biz dev.
Hmm.
Don't make your decisions based on things like that.
Yep. And like to what you were saying earlier about like developers who think it's the player's fault, or the people who got past this, they really enjoyed the game. I've seen that a lot from like first timers and novice developers where they'll say, okay, yes, 80% of the people who play my game quit before they finish the tutorial, but that 20% really love my game. So you'll change the tutorial? No. Or are you going to add anything or make things a little bit easier to understand? No. Because, I'm fine with like only 20% of the people who figured out how my game works. And it's that, again, like, it's that issue of understanding what the core of your game is. Like, obviously, if you're building, I don't know, a spaceship fishing game, and you decide one day someone says, well, I want you to make this a dancing visual novel. No, like that's not really going to work. You still need to keep to that
Right.
core, but you still need to be able to explain to someone, why does this core matter? Because if you can't do that, if you can't even get someone excited about walking left to right, swinging a sword, shooting a gun, hiding, stealth, whatever, you're never going to really be able to appeal to like a large market, or just appeal to more people in general, because no one's going to really give that game the time of day. And again, like I've seen this from, or I've seen like the opposite effect from a lot of indie developers who really embrace kind of like modern retro, like doing like really high quality pixel art games. Like they understand that their NES style game is not going to pull in Call of Duty numbers. It's not going to pull anything like that, so they're not worried about that. If they can get people who enjoy like a Shovel Knight or I am blanking on like the infinite number of pixel art games I played, that's fine
Mm-hmm.
because that's who their market is. And maybe it will
Mm-hmm.
pull someone who has only played, 4K DirectX 12 Unreal Engine 5 graphics to play it, but they're not necessarily worried about that because that's not who they're really aiming for. But they know who that market is, and that's what they're trying to cater to, at least first and foremost.
Yep. I mean, I've said it before, maybe not on your show, but I had an exec that he wanted basically Gears of Strider. He was like, "Why is it so colorful?
Mm-hmm.
Why are your whole vibe?" Um, we had this whole discussion about the vibe, and he wanted it. He was like, "Well, Nolan proved, with like Batman Begins and Dark Knight." Um, and I said, "That's great, but to be honest, that fits Batman's character more than even that. I grew up on the Adam West Batman, but
Mm-hmm.
Nolan's vibe is an evolution of Tim Burton's vibe, and to be honest, they fit the character more. That the character of Strider, if you look at the games and everything, you know, there's nothing serious about coming into a room and a whole bunch of not Nazis jumping up and turning into a mechanical dragon. Like, come on, like that's absurd. A giant gorilla takes up the entire screen. It's absurd. He was like, yeah, but that was because it was back then in the arcade. And I said, yeah, but he hasn't there's no evolution. There is
Mm-hmm.
an arcade game that happened 25 years ago, and then there's an appearance in fight games, and then there's now, and even in the fight games, he's just arrogant and loud and kind of cocky. He's there's nothing that would make any fan of Strider go that he should be somber and that the whole world should be all gray and brown and everything. And I told him, I said, I would much rather get 100% of the people that want this game than to get 30% of everybody and then have all these people who didn't really want the game but somehow got sucked up into it sitting there crapping on it.
Yeah.
And the final thing that I told him was, I said, you will hate this game, but you will love what it does for the studio. That was well, actually I was going to say that was the last time we had a discussion, but the last part of the discussion was the whole look and vibe, and that what like because he used to work in movies and I'm rather movie centric also, and he said, like, what you want, like Fifth Element? And I'm all, yes, yeah, I want Fifth Element. If this was a movie, it's not Dark Knight, it is Fifth Element. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's ridiculous. And I said, okay, I'll compromise. It's Avengers. I said Avengers is funny and action. It's colorful, but not too colorful. It's Avengers is a 7. It's just kind of there. It's inoffensive. It has some spikes to make you go yeah and clap and everything. And I actually I love the first Avengers. I love practically everything MCU for the first 10 years. I think it's an amazing arc that they took for Tony Stark. Tony Stark, like
Mm-hmm.
it's his story. It's a 10-year arc. An amazing execution, right? Um, but if we're being really honest about um, the first Avengers, is much safer than a lot of other things they even ended up doing later.
Mm-hmm.
It's um, but so I said I can give you that. I'll give you something that's colorful, a little bit of funny, a little bit of serious, um, you know, fairly innocuous. Of course, if you play Strider, it's still probably a little more spicy than he wanted. But again, you'll love what it does for the studio. If you don't like it, fine. Not for him. It's for the people that love Strider, and that's kind of the thing. It's like I don't know. I don't think that everybody under the sun will want to play a marble with headphones, running around a like kind of um, sort of 3D Sonic-y kind of looking world that's built on a sphere, interacting with like I don't even know. I should come up with a better way to explain all the little parts of in the DNA of BPM Boy. But like, I don't know how many people are going to like that. I'm hoping, you know, um, hoping a couple 100,000. That'd be nice. But it's like the people that love it, the people that have played it already, and the people that love it, they really love it, and I love that. I yeah, I want that's what I want when I make a game. I want the people that bought the game go, yeah, I really love this game. I really love my time with it. Um, what do you got next?
Yeah. And to your point about like finding like the market, like find like that game where you know that 100% of the people who are buying it know exactly what they're getting into and that's what they want about it. As a really good example of that, I recently, like going back to what we were saying earlier about like playing games from like all walks and corners of the industry. I tried out this game, Arzette, Arzette, and the entire tagline on this game is to emulate the CDI Phillips like the Legend of Zelda game, with like all the weird
Oh
cutscenes and
wow.
animations, but do it
Mhm.
legitimately well in terms of the gameplay. And we were enjoying this on stream. And when I looked at kind of like the clear rates and the achievements, they are far higher than I would have normally expected. And some of the audience
Mhm.
came up with a point that I think works, that it's because everyone who's buying this game knows exactly the game that this is. Like they're not buying this game
Mhm.
thinking, oh, maybe it's like Dark Souls, maybe it's like Call of Duty. No, it's like Legend of Zelda on the CDI Phillips. If you're into something weird and wacky like that,
Oh,
here
I
you
mean
go.
the logo starts out with putting a CD
Yep.
into a drive. Yeah, great. I mean, that's the thing. It's like in today's market where 1,000 games get released each day or whatever the actual statistic is, probably not too far off from that. But how do you break through the noise?
Yep.
And a lot of people have a lot of different methods. I don't have time to make a vlog about games that I'm supposed to be making, and talking about them. I don't have time for that. I mean, getting my time is like crazy. Um, and that's one method. Courting controversy, that's another method. Like there's all kinds of methods to kind of get above the noise nowadays. But um, being focused on the customer, being focused on the person that you want to get the game and to enjoy the game, I think is an untapped um, marketing strategy, or it's something that who think about marketing all the time seem to have I don't know, they've gotten really soft on it instead of hyper focusing. They're stuck in a previous mindset of still trying to go broad, and even when they're thinking about okay, market segments. Um, like back in the day, there'd be a McDonald's commercial, and then there'd be a Hispanic McDonald's commercial and a Black McDonald's commercial, right? So they have different music and different sets of people and all that stuff. Like that's still not really like
Mhm.
it's not like they changed the food. It's a broad mass market food, and what they did was they said, "See, your people like this too, right?" That's different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually the product being focused. You know, that's 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 different. You literally are going. okay, I am going to make this for people that really loved Vanquish, but didn't want it in third. They wanted it. They want it top down. They want Vanquish meets Diablo or something, right? And I'm going to make it specifically for that person. How many of those people are out there? I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully enough to actually cover the cost of making this damn thing. But that's what I'm going to do. And so then every choice that you make is focused on that. It's on making. So it's like, okay, um, what's the Venn diagram on those two? On those two, what is it that I need to? Where's the middle that I need to hit? Someone that loves Vanquish, what do they love it for? Someone that loves the parts of Diablo, what do they love it for? And it's funny because those are I just I'm ass pulling right here, but it's like those are kind of diametrical opposed because most people that most people love Vanquish. It's about it's about the adrenaline and it's about there's a high skill level in being a good Vanquish player. Getting around on your knees and aiming and shooting and all that fun stuff. Versus Diablo, where it's about your gear. The skill is not in the shot. The skill is in working out your build for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to take those two and look at them, it's like, okay, what's the what's a Venn diagram on that? What's the middle? What's the combination? And how do you make it so that the person um, that wanted that middle, feels heard? And actually, I mean, I guess I'm kind of like that. I like the spectacle of Vanquish. I like the speed. I like how visceral it is. Um, um, Imagine Vanquish if um, you could make these absurd, like Destiny 2, Diablo 3 style builds. I say Diablo 3 because I haven't played enough Diablo 4 to know if they totally borked the system or not. Um, that's like, I think I just talked about a product I should make. Now I think about it, but yeah, you get it. It's like if you're taking these things that are diametrically opposed, then it's like figure out what it is that both sides would actually come together on and would actually still like, and then hyper focus on making that thing right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't um, don't just slap something in or on top of something else because it's the new thing or it's popular or you're fast following. So that's always been a losing strategy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you hyper focus on something, then you can feel it. You can feel it from the second, or you should be able to feel it from the second that the game starts up. Um, and it should make your marketing job easier in the sense that when you present something, someone goes, "Ooh," and then if you're like clear and concise about what it is, then you should go, "Ah, okay," and I'm on board. And then you just have to pay off on what you said you were going to do with once you get someone on board, versus being kind of flashy but ambiguous, and then someone picks up your game and they're like, "This is nothing like anything that I wanted."
Mm-hmm.
I saw a trailer. I saw a trailer this morning for a thing, and um, it looked. It kind of looks like Hell Divers too. It's like got your marine types, and you've got like your rough Unreal 5 looking terrain, and um, you've got lots of lasers and mechs and greasy bugs coming over hills and all that stuff. Um, so I'm looking at this trailer, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, cool, yeah, like looks like Helldivers too. But then I start looking at it more, um, and the game doesn't tell you what it is. Like it's got a bunch of flashy stuff, and then it like I said, it has some gameplay, and it kind of looks like Helldivers too. But then I start looking at it more, and I'm like, you know what? this could not be like what I'm thinking it is. It actually could swerve left and go into a completely different direction, and that is a problem. So I had to tell my friend these things. He showed me his trailer that I'm not allowed to talk about it this very second. But it's like you you really want to be clear and clean. I mean, sure, you want to be flashy and get people's excitement, especially with your debut. Like, hey, this is what I've been working on, right? But you really want to make sure people understand what it is and what it is not,
Yep.
because there's nothing worse than someone getting a hold of what your thing is and it's not what they wanted. Because in today's age, um, if you're lucky, then they'll just go "Ugh," and then move on. But for some strange reason, outrage sells, and outrage seems to be a great fuel. So the next thing you know, you're getting 1 star somewhere and all this stuff, um, and it poisons the well. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm not going to spend. I'm not the type of person to spend my energy trying to make you like me in the sense of like, um, oh, please don't give me 1 star. Like I'm not doing that. My
Mm-hmm.
game speaks for speaks for myself. It speaks for me. Um, so I would rather put the effort into the actual game making, to try and avoid said 1 star versus me being out there as a personality trying to beg you not to 1 star me or ratio me or whatever it is. Um, the thing, and unless you've got AAA publisher marketing budget to overcome all that, it's important to set expectations. You know, do what you said, come through with what you say once you establish what you've said, and stick to it. And then if there's enough consensus of problems, then take a step back and look at it and go, is it really a problem? Is it groupthink? Like, is this momentum built because of some random negativity? Or did I not do my job? You know, okay to say I didn't do my job correctly. Because you can fix that. Fixing a negative wave because somebody decided to set up a campaign against your game and all that stuff. A lot of energy to overcome that. A lot of energy that would be better put into your game, and overcoming an issue that was something that you kind of failed on, you didn't see, you were blind to, or whatever. So that's kind of my philosophy on things. It's my babble. I'm good for babble.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. As a time check, we are just at 2 hours in. I think we could talk for like another 5 to 7 hours. Uh, there is uh, there's 2 points I did want to ask you specifically about action design, and then we'll kind of like see where we're at time wise.
Hmm.
One thing I want to ask you about is about the act of defense or defensive mechanics in action games. This is something that I see many different developers go all over the place on, where the timing or the power of defense can certainly just completely change how someone plays a game. There are some titles where like the act of parrying or repose is so powerful and so easy, it just completely breaks the combat. That you can just parry the shot, immediately get a counter hit, destroy the enemy. And then there are some games where defending is so difficult that let's say there's no hit stun, the enemy there's no iframe on dodge, the enemy can just like track you like immediately a 180 swing, even if you're behind them. And there are people who, again, like to go back to the point we were saying about like the hardcore audience, and they love that like super difficulty, but it's
Hmm.
complete like hardness for anyone who's new to the game. And I played everything in between. I want to get your thoughts again as someone who's had so much experience making action-based design, like the feedback and feel. Where do you fall on kind of like how much like defensive mechanics or defensive systems should be like really powerful, not that powerful, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I mean, and this is going to sound hyper generic, but it really does. It depends. Like
Mhm.
for me, it always goes back to what is the intent of the game. So,
Mhm.
is it a power fantasy? Am I supposed to feel amazing all the time? Am I Superman, or am I not? And so, from that kernel of thought to begin with, should dictate how how effective your defenses are. But I feel like if I am if I'm going through a game and it's too easy, I start to question. I go, well, okay, is it too easy because I'm too good? I better be good. I've been playing this thing for thousands of hours, and I've been making it, and I know what's going on underneath the hood, right? So is it too easy because of that? Um, or is it too easy because it's really too easy? If it's too easy because my skill set is so high because of time on task and understanding the systems, then the next layer down below that is that a problem? It should always be the case for any designer is um, what did I do wrong? Is it a problem? Right? So um, is it a problem um, that I am this good and therefore this game is that easy? Um, and you have to like sit and go, how long does it take Johnny Average to get to the point where I'm at? Is it something that takes no time to discern, like how to break the game? Then that's a problem. Um, but if it takes 100 or several hundred hours, that's not necessarily a problem. It means that there is kind of a target and a reward for being really good at said game. Uh, and then you can kind of work your way back from that to make sure that uh, for newbies it isn't a cakewalk. When it comes to like defense and things like that, there's so many layers to it. Like um, again, let's use Buffy. Okay, so in Buffy there's a block button. You can hold down block, and characters can come and wail on you. Well, there's a lot of stuff at play in that. There's the AI knows how many times it's attempted an attack and failed. A fail is, I attempted and I didn't hit you, or I attempted and it was blocked, right? So after a certain number of failures, it'll search through its list of things that it can do, especially if it's a block. If you're just sitting there blocking, turtled up, it'll it'll go, okay, I have a grapple that'll break your block, or I have this move that is a block breaker, and it'll blow you out, right? And those things are there so that someone can't just sit there turtled up and not receive any punishment for it. Um, and it like makes the AI look stupid if it's just sitting there wailing on you, and it's getting nowhere. It's not getting any feedback, any positive feedback, as in like a positive hit contact. Um, it makes your AI look stupid, and that's one of those elements that can pull people out of the game. Again, we could be talking about Robotron, right? Imagine Robotron had a shield button. You can sit there and move around and hold down the shield button, but you can't shoot, right? So okay, there's a trade-off. Cool. But you're holding down the shield button, and the enemies that let's say there's most of the enemies in Robotron, I forgot. I don't think they shoot, but let's say there's a couple of them that do shoot. They just keep shooting at your shield, shooting at your shield, shooting at your shield. They just look stupid because they've shot at your shield a certain number of times and nothing has happened. They haven't changed position. They're just sitting there shooting. Makes them look stupid. then it pulls you out of the whole thing. And we're talking about you could be sucked into a game like Robotron. It's a simple, or Geometry Wars, fine, whatever. You, know, you don't want anything that makes your game look stupid that pulls people out, right? That's part of the reason that in things like Buffy, they have block breakers, because we didn't want the enemies to look stupid. Try to mitigate that as much as possible. Um, but what it does is it allows by putting like the things like block breaking attacks, a certain number of them, or like the grapple, um, putting it on the enemy. What it did for us in Buffy was um, it'll uh, it was just another part of the system, part of the machinery. So it wasn't like, oh, I've got to sit here and now I've got to tune another economy essentially. No, I have to tune this character, grunt one, tune this grunt one. You know, what does he have that can blow you open? He's got one kick that he can do that could blow open your guard, right? Does he have a grapple? No, right? Then Grunt 3 has a grapple and the kick, right? So um, again, like I said, you don't have to build like a new economy of okay, I've got this much damage resist on this, and I got this, and like there's so many unnecessary numbers when, especially when you have to work quickly, like we did on Buffy. Like okay, make sure that the dance between the player and the character, that the rock paper scissors going back and forth between them. That way, level designers, I go, okay, level designers, here are the 3 crayons you can use for your picture in this level, right? And the reason that you can use these three crayons is not just thematic, it's also because they fit into the difficulty curve that we're looking for in this, right? Um, so since these things are on the enemy and they're part of the dance between the player's mechanics and the enemy mechanics, um, the difficulty increases with the difficulty of the enemy, which also means that like kind of your your skill level should hopefully increase,
Mm-hmm.
like including, and it's not just your skill level at punching and kicking and all that stuff. Your skill level at knowing how to block, when to block, how much can you block. Um, should I block once and then dash back, which then essentially semi resets the AI. Because the AI is now like, oh, okay, I did one I did one fail that was a block, and I did one fail that was a whiff, right? So you can kind of game the AI in that manner, but that's okay because at that point, people that understand, block, then dash out, then dash in with an attack or something like that. They are learning. They are utilizing skills that Johnny and Jenny, first level don't have. They're exploring the depth of the game, so they're feeling better about what they can do. The AI is responding the way that it should. They get to beat up on the little guys and go, "Ha ha! You were a pain in the butt at first because I didn't know how to do this." They get to beat up on them now. Then they start to next level run into guys that are harder, and it's not just because they have +10 on their armor. They're harder because they are playing against the mechanics that you have, that you've always had. Just now they're forcing you to utilize them, or they're putting you in a position where you have to become more aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I look at things like defense and whatnot. Even in Polygunner, which is a top-down shooter, um, it has moving, shooting, and like I said, the dash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the all of those systems actually are really simple on the surface, but used in concert, they really provide a lot of depth, and especially utilizing the dash, where because everything physics based and momentum based. Like if there's a hail of bullets coming at me, um, I could turn and move away. The likelihood that I'm going to have to get really crafty at dodging and moving away is high if I just use the basic engine of the ship, right? But if I give a little thread, little thump to my dash, I get just enough extra momentum to move a little faster, so I can reconnoiter myself. And then you start getting into, well, the dash doesn't necessarily have to be in the direction that you're facing, which also doesn't necessarily have to be in the direction that the gun is facing, because they, even though it's not twin stick, they're independent. And you start doing things like almost like circle strafing something. You'll like dash and like flip around, um, and then all of a sudden you're training your gun on it, on this thing that didn't even realize you moved for a frame or two. It's like holy crap, and you can almost see the AI go, what the hell, and then start turning to engage you. Um, so like to me, I like to make these defensive things organic and to have depth. Like I said, that it's a conversation. Everything to me, 'cause I make action games for the most part. Conversation between me and the player. The environment is usually like me talking to the player. The enemies are me talking to the player. The player is talking back to the enemies. It's all just this conversation going back and forth. I want to shoot you. I want to kill you. No, you don't. Watch this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like with like defense, like with like AI behavior, the enemy behavior like that, it's always hard. I think like how much you want to like fine tune or kind of make the AI's behavior very explicit in terms of their response to the player. I remember like this was going back to when I played a Sifu, and like one of the things that they did in that one was that they had certain enemies that would specifically behave a specific way, as in this is the enemy who you are not. He will auto block every attack. You must do like a sweep. This is the
Mm-hmm.
anti-sweep enemy. He will always counter sweep. You must block his attacks and then counter. And
Mm-hmm.
there's always I think that push and pull for a lot of people in terms of like, do you like a more like freeform combat system where yes, this enemy has a good way to beat them, a good way to beat them, but you can ignore that and just rip and tear like a Doom Eternal or an Ultra Kill, or do you design the enemy to be like very explicit, saying like this is the blue enemy, he will only take damage from blue shots. This is the red enemy, he will only take damage from red shots. And I think for me personally, I'm not a fan when it's like so hard coded, where it feels like
Mm-hmm.
combat becomes less of like getting the player to the flow and more of okay, I must do this exact way, then this exact way, then this exact way. But there are games I think like to even counter my own point. There are games that kind of go for like the like Tony Hawk, like very like trick style where it's supposed to be like a line where you're just doing like specific behaviors to maximize everything and the flow stays in like figuring out that perfect order. So I think it's very hard sometimes to figure out just like how you want your combat to kind of feel in the player's hands like that.
Yeah, I I don't I don't think there's a hard. I think you can mix and match it, and I
Mm-hmm.
certainly have in past games. Um, Tend to like things to be semi-organic, not as hard coded or rigid as I would have done in the past. And when I say the past, I mean literally like pre-2000 past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, I'm babbling about Buffy a lot here, but since we're talking about combat, it's got a really robust combat system. Thank you, James Goddard
Mm-hmm.
and Dave Winstead. But the like it in Buffy, there are characters that are like very much. Um, I am super vulnerable to this thing. I am less vulnerable to that thing. Right. That's kind of the approach. Is um, and um, James Goddard was very adamant that he didn't want it where you could just jab some character to death, right?
Mhm.
He's like, this looks stupid, and he showed me a grunt, and he just jabbed him, and then the guy fell over and dusted. And I'm like, yeah, that does seem kind of stupid that you went through all this, back and forth, hoorah, and then the last hit is this little quick jab. And that's where it was like, oh, well, duh, you should have to stake them. Um, and then, it's like, well, not everything's a vampire. So, okay, well, then you have to do a kill move on everything. And then it's like, well, what if you don't have a stake? So that's where, the evolution of this over the course of building the game was, okay, well, then you should be able to make stakes through the environment. So then there's lots of environment kills that you can either see or create on your own. Um, and like, there were characters that were like, okay, this one is, this one's like top heavy. Like, this character's got like broad shoulders, big. He skipped leg day, right? Basically. So low kicks are it's open. It's more susceptible to low kicks. It's not going to block as quick or dodge for these certain types, and it's always a dice roll. Always a percentage. Um, so it's not. It's very rare that anything in Buffy is hard coded as to this will never work. Um, and what that does is kind of the thing I was talking about, with like discovery versus reveal. You know, um, game doesn't tell you, hit the big orange spot for massive damage. I mean, not that we don't have those kind of tells, but um, it's you can discover ways to kill enemies, and then as a player you feel better about it. You feel good, because you're like, oh, I did that, right? That's really what it comes down to with games. To really um, sell player engagement and to make them feel good about your game, the player has to feel like they did it. It's as simple as that. It's one of the reasons that everybody was like so anti quick time event, right? Um, not that they don't look cool. I mean, they generally do. Um, but the cool stuff is not being done necessarily by the player. It's pressing an arbitrary button. It's pressing a button that doesn't do that under normal circumstances to do something cooler than you could do under normal circumstances, right? And so there's, this. So that's part of the kind of rejection of the quick time event. Um, there's no discovery there. Just reveal. The button prompt is revealed to you. That there you go. Okay. Versus you being in the midst of combat with some character and you um, learning the timing that actually if you do a backhand swirl with your bladed weapon at the right time, you're going to behead the character, behead the enemy, and you just saved yourself, 3 minutes on a fight because you learned and got that timing down right. One of the things that's funny is, again in Buffy, um, lower level vampires um, are susceptible to staking when they land from a jump. Most people don't know that, Um, but every once in a while, someone will see, like a vamp will jump up to them or something and land and start talking shit. And if someone like hits a stake button, Buffy will swirl around and like the second that they land, just stake them. I mean, they could be at full health. We don't care. Because they're open right at that split second, at that split second that they land. Um, and so for the people that learn that and everything, they're like, and then they start looking for other opportunities. They start looking for other openings. Where can I punish? It's like a fight game. I mean, there's a reason that people will play the same fight game for decades, and it's because of the organic nature of of what's a positive hit versus negative versus being punished. Um, and I feel like um, combat in action games are better. Certainly, you know, yeah. I just feel like they're better when you can find those moments, and they're kind of logical moments too. Like I
Mhm.
said, like when a vamp lands, he comes down in his cute little matrix pose and hits the ground. It's at that split second he's not in a position to protect himself. So he's just like fake or goodbye. Or like I said, you're kicking the shins of Mister Missed Leg Day, and he's getting a hit reaction, and just at that moment, then you do the spinning attack that cuts his head off, and you saved yourself 3 or 4 minutes on a fight that normally would have taken much longer because it's a tough guy, and
Mhm.
and we telegraph that through his aesthetics and the movements and everything like that. It's like you leave those little windows underneath the hood for people to discover because games are about interaction and discovery.
Mhm. Yep, and I think that's what I really liked about kind of like the push forward combat of like Doom Eternal and Ultra Kill, where they do have those quick kill setups for a lot of the enemies, and it really comes down to you. Okay, yes, you can just shoot this guy with 10 rockets and he'll eventually go down, or you can hit like the weak point over here, stun him, go in for the quick kill, bing bang boom, he's dead in maybe like 5 seconds of starting that fight. I think it really
Mm-hmm.
comes down to like as you said, like having like enough like things under the hood, enough strategies or depth to your system that the player has like this room where again it's not just yellow, blue, red. That was one of the things I think I didn't like about if you played a DMC, the American edgy version of Devil May Cry, where they introduced a
I mean,
whole like
technically, they're not American, but yeah, the
yeah,
Western one.
Western there, and like it got to that point where it was like okay, you can only use the red shot on red enemies or the blue form on blue enemies. And it just felt like, well, you have this really great combat system, but now you're just dividing it in half for a lot of the combat. And again, it's very hard to like how much you throw at the player in terms of these systems and rules, for it just becomes very like bogged down by it.
Yeah, and I mean, if your game is focused on that, then that's fine. You still want to, like in the case of DMC, you want to make sure that it's still, it still plays to the core IP. Like
Mm-hmm.
the core of it of Devil May Cry is not Ikaruga the brawler, um, and so it if it slows it down or if it takes it in another direction, you really have to stop and think: Am I doing my job right? Is this is this right for the actual IP, the actual audience? Is it part of the core? You know, uh, I was working on boss fights for BPM, and there are elements of BPM that are kind of Sonic-like. So I was like, I should look at some Sonic bosses. I haven't even looked at that newest Sonic game. I think it's Super Stars or whatever the hell it is. Anyway, so I'm looking at the latest thingy, and I'm looking at the boss fights, and I'm like, yeah, some of them are fine, you know, but um, they uh, they're not fine for Sonic, right? And it's um, and it's because they take away one of the things that Sonic is about. Sonic's about speed, right? Sonic Sonic is never really about sitting and waiting. Sonic always
Mm-hmm.
feels weird, no matter what it is, 2D or 3D, all the way back to 1991 or whatever when the first one came out. Anytime that you were stopped and waiting, there's a reason he's tapping his foot. You feel anxious. You feel like something's wrong if you're sitting there waiting. Um, and the bosses in Sonic, the hell is this thing called Superstars or whatever? There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of waiting for when you can attack. Not even like waiting in a defensive mode. I mean, just like waiting for some, and so they would be fine for like a, I don't know, Donkey Kong Country or something, right? But they're not right for Sonic because there's all this downtime where you can't attack, and there's points where you should be able to attack,
Hmm.
but for some strange reason you can't because why? It's video game, and designer decided that's not when you should be attacking. And so instead of doing that, they should open up the when you can attack more. Just open it up. If Robotnik is actually on the plane with Sonic, then fine. Let him let a player, anybody that's skilled enough, let them sit and hammer on him because that's what the old games did, and that's what your fans want, right? They want your fan wants to figure out how to do the game as fast as possible. So by making these closed, little attack windows in Sonic bosses, you've taken away the agency, one of the things that made the fans love the game. And that's just it, you need to know your audience. And it feels like to me they did not know their audience with those boss fights. It just totally makes the game drag to a halt at that point. Um, and so yeah, like I said, I was looking at them and that style for BPM, which is a different vibe altogether. But for the high end player in BPM, it is about speed running. The speed running comes from um, your utilization of the physics with the environment and kind of understanding what's way ahead of you, way ahead of you off camera, right? Um, so when I'm looking at the boss fights for BPM, I'm thinking, okay, um, how can I still reward the high skilled BPM player? How can I reward them by utilizing the physics to essentially stay in the zone to damage when normally they get blown out of that area? Or how can I um, build the environment so that a skilled player can, Tony Hawk ramp it up to the enemy before this damage phase even kicks in. And I'm a firm believer, if someone can figure out how to do something in a game, then so be it. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna just arbitrarily stop you. I mean, sure, there's invisible walls in the game, so if you go careening way off into the stratosphere, I'm gonna, blow you up or something. But um, if you figured out a little crack to slip through and then jump out and come out on the other side, my choices are fill that crack or let you do it. It's just as simple as that. Uh, because again, it goes back to like the whole discovery thing. If someone discovers a way around your game, I feel like they should kind of be rewarded, or you should have fixed it.
Hmm. Yeah, and it kind of goes something that I wrote I think a few weeks ago about kind of like mastery in games and how it's always good to have like those little like advanced elements because it always gives people like I guess like that feeling like there's more to your game. That if you can use a special trick to fight this hard enemy, then maybe there's a special trick for this hard encounter or this hard section. And I always like to reward, or I always like games that reward mastery like that. I mean, I can rave about going through a P ranking ultra kill for like the next 30 minutes,
Mhm.
but it is such a really great idea or a really great feeling to the player when they know that, or I think I said this before, like that the illusion that the player stumbled across that super secret tactic that, the developer totally didn't know about, but they really did know about because why they didn't know about, why is it in the game? And
Mhm.
it makes it feel like there's a lot more to it. And I could, we could segue into talking about like roguelike design. We'll be here until tomorrow
Mhm.
easily.
Yeah, you need to just come up with a list of topics, and we'll just go through them over the course of the rest of the year, I guess.
It'll probably take more than that. And like if we bring Tomo in, we'll be here. Oh my goodness, that'll
Uh,
just be like never ending. Like the audience will love it. They want to see me just do like a 24-hour cast on a topic. But um, I think with that, yeah, we are approaching what we just hit 2.5 hours. I think that is definitely more than enough for this conversation. But again, there's still so much more we can chat about, and there we barely touched the surface of action design. I can think of like 10 more topics I can easily throw at you.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. But I love to talk shop.
Mhm.
Um, don't get as many opportunities as I used to. So um, anytime I can babble and hopefully entertain and enlighten, because
Mhm.
I'm really on this kick of kind of I don't know, like accelerating designer knowledge
Mhm.
because I feel like a lot of the, um, modern games, it's not just the AAA publishers wanting to be safe and the pressures and all of that stuff. It's not just that. It's actually like a kind of lack of knowledge, right? And I mean that's no slight. Everybody has to, you have to crawl before you walk and then run.
Mhm.
Um, I was just talking to a buddy the other day about how when I first started, I would I would make a game in a week, um,
Mhm.
maybe 2 weeks top, and then that would turn that then professionally that would turn into like a game in 3 months, and then 6 months, and then 9 months, and then a year, and then you start getting into 2 years, 3 years, right? So right now it seems like I don't know, like the average game dev cycle is like 5 years or so. So then you get someone who's like got 10 years under their belt and they're like screaming about how they're a veteran. And, me being crusty and 40 years into this, I kind of like scoff at that. But like, it's not just the years that I have. I think to myself, okay, if the average game takes 5 years to make and you're 10 years into it, that means if you worked on 2 games, that means you barely have turned the crank.
Mhm.
You barely, like, you've barely been through enough really start to get to where you start to kind of see the patterns and understand. Um, and so, want to try and help and accelerate people's knowledge, so that we can get out of kind of regurgitating the same thing over and over again because people are learning the same things over and over again while they're developing. They're running the same problems over and over again um, because these dev cycles are so long and they burn out people. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, or there's a generation change or whatever it is. I mean, seriously, 10, 15 years, by 10, 15 years, you should really start being proficient at what you're doing.
Mhm.
But you can't be if 10 or 15 years means that you've shipped 2 or 3 games.
Mhm.
You can't. Um, and so I like to spit out all of these isms and stuff to try and help give, even if it just jump starts a thought, give people some sort of knowledge so they can start heading in the right direction faster, or say, hey, that guy's full of crap, and not head in my direction faster. Whatever it is to make it all better faster.
Mhm. And man, like again, like what we've seen from the indie space in the past 14 years has been a lot of new developers just really like quickly learning and adapting to the games they play and what they like and don't like. And again, sometimes it just doesn't work out, and there are times where it does work out in a big way. And again, like to your point about long dev cycles, I've people who are watching this right now, they know I've interviewed developers who, a 2 year project turns into 5, or a 6 month project turns into 8 to 10 years. And
Jeez Louise.
it is very hard, I think, for a lot of developers in terms of, like as we've said before, like here, like not in this conversation, but like here on the channel, that there is that difference between treating game dev as just like a passion or an art and treating it as a business, as something that you're intending to make a living off of. And if you don't understand that, and if you think, well, I can just release one game every 10 years and that's my livelihood, it's not going to work out like that for you. Or in most cases, it's not, because some of them, throw up, oh, well, Minecraft did it, or, Dwarf Fortress worked, but there are always outliers to that.
Right, right, and you just outliers are not, a business plan or a career path. And I mean, think about it. Like, what has Notch done since
Mm-hmm.
since he sold Minecraft? Um, one and done, then that's fine. But if you want to be in this for the long haul, you want this, to be your art, to be your craft. You need to be turning that crank. You need to do it. There's a reason that film students just are constantly making shorts,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because you know sitting down and going, okay, now we're going to make a feature length film for class is absurd. You get in there and you learn quickly by doing something quicker. By doing a 3 to 5 minute short, you will learn, oh, you know what? Next time I'm going to be a little more careful about the lighting on this. Or, next time I'm going to, know how to mic the characters
Mm-hmm.
better, the actors better, and you learn that in a reasonable amount of time versus just diving in and trying to magnum opus everything.
Yeah. Oh yes. Again, we started talking about like developers who are like so obsessed with like their perfect game. That's another 2 hour conversation for sure. Um,
So,
but Tony, it has been again another pleasure hanging out with you, and I am more than happy to ramble and talk about game design for another 2 to 3 hours again in the future. I guess.
well,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, you should chop this up,
Well,
into little bite-sized pieces and stuff.
I'm
Sure.
definitely this will be definitely split to at least 2 parts for sure.
Hmm.
But I guess for you, before I let you go, anything you else you want to promote, social media wise, game project wise, anything new?
Like I said, go wishlist BPM Boy on Steam, and I'm getting the Polygunner Steam page up. Those will be released on Steam soon. Um, you know, new school fun with old school flavor or something like that. So those are the two things that I'm really focused on right now. After that, then it might be a new strike or maybe that crazy vanquish I was babbling about. And that's kind of how it goes. And I'm kind of happy about that in the sense that I can I can be a little more fluid, a little more nimble than when I was in AAA, and I can focus on market segments that AAA would never, because you know big giant budgets and all that stuff that they have to deal with. While me, I can go. I want to make this thing. What it comes down to, it's not just I want to make something. It's really I want to play X or Y, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see it, so I go about making it. It's like I really wanted to play something that really felt Marble Madnessy. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I really want to play a shooter that wasn't about kiting, that was about finding the optimal spot in the room to just lay waste and destroy everything. Um, so those are the main things. Check out the website, check out Polygunner and BPM on Steam.
Nice. I'll put those links in down below. But I think with that, Tony, we'll say goodnight for now. As I said a few minutes ago, we still need to rope Tomo in. We have to get two people's schedules aligned. Which, as anyone who
Yeah,
knows from watching these shows in the past, the more people just exponentially makes the scheduling even harder. But we gotta try at some point.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and yeah, I mean, it's possible. Someone and I was hanging out, and we're hanging out at GDC all the time, so it's possible.
All right. Well, Tony, I will let you go for tonight, and as I said, we'll try and get another one of these scheduled in the future. But again, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Awesome, always a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Yep. All right. So for everyone watching, we're going to wrap things up here. As always, do the YouTubing stuff. Check out all the books I have, all the links, and all that. If you're a developer working on a game or just want to talk shop, I'm always looking for guests for this series, so feel free to reach out. Have a great night, everybody, and come back for the discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we some the art and science of games.